Patrick, Pitman is my name, and one of my nicknames is Pitmania. This was given to me by a team I've worked with a number of years. It's based in London, and they were facing the full bombardment when they would wake up tomorrow morning in just a few hours and have in their inboxes my full day of emails, tasks, decisions points. I'm a delegation maniac. And I would see in the email correspondence between them, Pitmania. And on the phone the next morning, I'd hear them in good-natured, but still in their best British and South African accents, fucking Pitmania. Hey, you know, when I'm around, we get shit done, people. I mean, I took it as a badge of honor, and I think they meant it as a friendly accusation. But it's, you know, who can complain about getting shit done? I'd like to, you know, New Year's resolutions, anyone would like to raise their hand for being more productive in 2017? Maybe delegating more effectively. Keep your hands up. Delegating more effectively. Getting shit done, of course. We'd like that. I'd like that. We can be all very busy, and I'd like just to, since we're in the mode of getting acquainted with one another, if you would be willing to humor me for a moment. Just turn to your neighbor if you have one, to the left or the right. I'd like to introduce yourself, and we could each say to each other, hello, my name is, and yes, I'm very busy. So, hello, my name is Patrick, and yes, I'm very busy. I'm very busy. We can all right. So, we're very busy. There we go. There we go. That's enough. Here we go again. It can feel easy to say that we're busy. It almost has an inherent significance to it. And I'd like to talk about how it, you know, being productive is certainly something that we can feel proud of. As a little bit of background, in 1999, I sold my Ford pickup truck, which gave me, as I figured it, about 60 days worth of cash as startup capital to keep my wife and 2 children at the time fed while I started a company in the middle of nowhere, Livingston, Montana. And I learned something about being productive and getting stuff done. Since that time, I've found that there are moments when being productive and the drive to move forward can get in the way when problems arise. Over 18 years, I've seen many problems. I'll tell you one story in a moment about a particular problem. But I'd like to talk about particularly the theme of resilience tonight and what it means as an entrepreneur. I've got a blue sticker on just like you. I've sat in the audience. What does it mean to recover from hardship? And where is there a tension sometimes between getting stuff done and the drive to move forward and take action and the resilience that enables us to recover from hardship? And when we find problems, where do we turn to advice? In my case, 1999 and thereafter, I was turning in Livingston, Montana. We didn't have meetups, didn't have podcasts, but I had Inc. magazine every month. And I looked forward to that, and I found that the advice that I got was inspiring at times. Sometimes, though, as I look back, it comes down to maxims and slogans. It can turn into a certain bravado. The fastest growing, how amazing you can be, how early you get up in the morning, the more that you can do. And we end up with slogans. Maybe you're familiar with this one. Has anyone seen this one? Follow one course until successful. That's a good one. I can get that. As long as your goals are smart. Now, there's a lot of different words you can put in those. Action-oriented is what I put on there because that's what comes to mind for me, but attainable is also one that I've seen. And I put a question mark next to that because this we're talking about what's attainable, really. And the question of resilience sort of prompts you to reflect upon that. In 2007, I was running an e-commerce software as a service company. We had a turnkey package, clients from London to California. And this is how it was described working for me. This is Steve, an employee older and wiser than myself. And he said, you know, working for me, Patrick, You can't see the whip, but you can feel the pressure. I took it again a little bit as a badge of honor at the time, not knowing any better. Anyone felt the whip in your work experience, in your office environment? Anyone hold the whip? Where are you investors out there? Come on. Who's got that? And so the whip can be useful when we're driving forward, and yet it's also the question of pressure is only so useful as long as we're going in the right direction. As long as we're going in the right direction. And when problems arise, it begs the question of how we respond. You've heard the word pivot. It's a common business word. You'll see it in Inc. magazine if you turn there at times. There's something that I've found over the years that's been uncommonly expressed. Something that, it's an F word. I'll describe it to you. And it turns out to be essential to nurturing these resilient entrepreneurs. It's not failure, although sometimes we are fearful of failure as an outcome in this situation. It's not fear, although we are often fearful in this circumstance. And fuck, we say that a lot when this comes about, and I walk around and you can feel it, but it's not that word either. And before you tell you what the word is, this here's my family. We now have 4 children. And I've found that as I started that project 20 years ago, my business started 18 years ago, so I'm a little bit ahead of the game on the parenting side. And with my wife's encouragement, we started to think about and ask ourselves what it meant to encourage healthy resilience in children and what that meant. And the more I learned, the more I got into understanding of human development. It led me to questions about how neuroscience is exploring the brain and its growth. I found that as my children were evolving, I myself had a lot that I hadn't learned either about resilience and about human development. And so it prompted me down this path. And I'm just an entrepreneur. I'm learning these lessons. I'm a little bit further down the road, and I'd like to share with you some of my observations about resilience tonight. Okay? So the word I described, 8 letters, begins with an F. When you have children, it starts to look like this when you're feeling it. You'll see defiance, slamming doors. Yes, I have teenage daughters. There's a lot of crying. In fact, I found that it's actually more of a problem when the teenage daughters stop crying, when they lose their tears. So the word is futility. It's futility because it's, let me describe what it means. It's that keen disappointment, the realization that we cannot change what is not working. We cannot change, and that asks us to change. Gordon Neufeld said that. He's a child human development psychologist, and some of the inspiration for the ideas I've been exploring. And as adults, we find these situations too, but we're up against things we can't change. Of course we do. People, they are so messy. Employees, partners, investors. How many investors wish you could change your entrepreneur? And vice versa. Products don't work. Sometimes the markets are wrong. There's never enough cash. Okay, we got email in the background. So do we describe these situations as futile? And my experience is no, most of the time. This is me. No, nothing's impossible. I'll focus on my SMART goals. Thank you very much. And I said that in 1999, 2005. I said it in 2006 in a story I'll tell you in just a moment. And in fact, I probably said it yesterday talking to my business partner, but I'm just in denial about it. I don't think it's quite futile yet. Not willing to accept what she wouldn't understand. So, if you will, you met your neighbor a moment ago. I'm going to ask you to turn back to them and say something else. We said we were busy a moment ago. Just say this one thing if you would. We'll see how it feels. We'll try it out. If you would turn to your neighbor and say, "It's not working and I can't change it." It's not working and I can't change it. All right. Now, I have to say that there's something about this. There's something about this that is a little bit embarrassing. Any twinge of embarrassment? Not exactly the same feeling as being busy. It's a little different. And the fact of the matter is that futility is just not boardroom friendly. It's a tender feeling. This is something that maybe with your teenage daughter you can put your arm around her shoulder, but not so much at the conference room table. It's not very culture friendly either. #1 business podcast on iTunes, Entrepreneur on Fire, just listening the other day, was describing how he only insists on good vibes. And everyone he deals with, good vibes, people. Good vibes. Everything is awesome. Futility is not very man-friendly either. Now, here we are in Texas. We have certain sort of manliness sensibilities. I used to live in Montana. We're not the same, but there's a lot we have in common. I grew up looking at Bo Jackson. When I thought about starting my company, just do it. 60 days cash, see what you can make happen. Don't stop until you meet your goal. So, where does that leave us? As I've learned more about neuroscience, it's prompted some different reflections upon it. So what is neuroscience? You can see the definition there. And I'm going to give you the 60-second version. In a nutshell, there are neural pathways. They race through our entire body. It's not just a head thing, all the way through us. In fact, when we talk about what we feel in our gut, massive nerve system wrapped all around here. At birth, we have this dense mesh of neural pathways. If you imagine all these interlocking pathways back and forth, it's full up, it's dense, it's a mesh. And after feeling emotions, including futility, those neural pathways are pruned and we start getting less. In fact, the connections, the paths are cut. Their way is blocked. The way is shut. And then we adapt, and the fewer left behind are reinforced. And that's what experience looks like in the body, in the brain. Experience looks like fewer reinforced pathways because we've had to adapt. The pathway has been cut. We found a new way around. And so adaptation is the reason why futility is so important. It's the fruit. It's that even if we don't get our way, we're okay. And so you can see why it's good for teenagers to have this sensibility. A lot of things don't go their way. It doesn't mean that we're failure-proof. It means we're life-ready. Business-ready is what you might think about it in our context here tonight. And so it follows after reaching a still point of futility. It's what is the precursor to potent and inspired action. Not busyness in sort of a compulsive way, but inspired action. So I'm going to tell you for a moment about futility. How much time do I have left?
About 5 minutes.
In the 5 minutes we have remaining, I'm going to tell you a little story about futility, and I'd like to, while you're listening to me, to have an experiment with yourself and think about how many times you might imagine in your mind what I could have done differently, what I should have done, what I didn't do but could have. The strategies are coming forth. You're going to start realizing all things that you'll have a million ideas. Please, if you would, notice how often you try to jump to the solution, try and get busy, imagine what I could have done. Instead of feeling what amounts to a pretty big, here we go. My moment of futility began in 2006 when I got a phone call from my system administrator. Late at night, he discovered sudo access had been compromised. For those of you in the DevOps world, root was given to an unauthorized user. We were hacked. It's unfortunate because this happened to be a backup server where not all of our systems were fully up to date, but we did have an accumulation of backup data which included unencrypted credit card numbers, numbering in the tens of thousands. And as I thought about the possibility of Visa and MasterCard passing down $250,000 fines to every bank involved in the transactions of tens of thousands of credit cards, which would be cascaded down to my clients and their merchant processors, hello, Wells Fargo, and then, of course, to me, because it wasn't compliant with the payment card industry's data security standard. And there was nothing at that point that I could do to change it. And so I imagined what would happen with the credit cards I already had maxed out, with the 4 children I had under 10, with the new system architect I'd hired at great expense, with the big clients I had been signing up, multi-million-dollar e-commerce companies, a big one in Atlanta that would have to be put on hold. And the more I thought, the more I imagined, the more the futility just sort of sank in, and I dropped to my knees because I couldn't stand up anymore. And I pounded on the table, and the tears of futility poured forth. Poured forth. So, now instead of thinking about the solution, let's just for a moment feel the emotion of that. Because this is the same time that a little project started called WordPress. We had CMS. A little shopping cart got started called Shopify that same year. We already had it. Magento just gaining steam. Hello. So instead of doing those things and competing with those organizations, I spent the next 2.5, 3 years dragging Rackspace, kicking and screaming, through a deep and thorough understanding of payment card industry data security standard, and we learned together. Now the trouble with this is I got the next morning and went back to the same old thing. You think I had a whip before? Well, I had a whip the next morning. We called Visa and we got started to work. The futility there was overwhelming. And unfortunately, it was a cascade and a buildup of many things where futility had been deferred because I had made architectural choices that didn't work. I had saved customers the feeling of futility by agreeing to customize software that shouldn't have been. So the futility was, in a sense, a deficit that had built up. I didn't take no for an answer. I'd fix it later. Flake it till we make it, right? In terms of what you may find in your own experiences, what happens, what does it look like when you're disconnected from the feelings of these emotions? These are some of the signs. A curious one that I found was interesting was sarcasm. I had a lot of sarcasm in the subsequent years. A lot of sarcasm. Emotions, as it turns out, they help us express these feelings. When we depress them, the emotions stay stuck. And the emotion that is felt instead springs the mind and the body to action. In fact, the actual feeling, the felt sense of it, moves us to a different place. So, the most important emotion to feel is disappointment, as it turns out. 3 minutes we've got. Let's talk about pivots. What Forbes says, the difficulty with a pivot in your business, if you're still trying to figure out how to be a resilient entrepreneur, is that it goes against our single-minded determination to make it work. So we're talking about situations that don't work. It's hard. Now, I put something in parentheses in this quote up here. I'm not sure if you can edit Lao Tzu, but I'm going to tonight. Humor me for the minute. Maybe it's a translating problem. I'm going to fix this translation for you. Can you remain unmoving till the right action arises by itself? I would say, can you be moved to stillness till the right action arises by itself? I like to think and learn through my body. I feel things. Sometimes I can learn things that I can't in my head by what I'd feel. And I find myself in Santa Monica regularly. I was there a few months ago. Every time I walk out in the waves, I sort of plod forward just for the invigoration of the water. It was November last time, pretty cold and bracing. But you step out and you kind of move your way through, and it's actually pretty frustrating. There are surfers who kind of know a way to do that, but I don't. And I kind of do a lot of thrashing around, and this is what it looks like. And just for fun, I thought, all that thrashing around, all that busyness, all that's trying to be productively moved and plod forward, what would it feel like to just turn around, and as the wave comes, look over your shoulder, and just sit back into it and let it catch you? And carry you forward to a place where maybe from over here, you're at a different vantage point. And the wave energy moves past you, and there you are with a new vantage, and you can see something that you couldn't see before. Maybe the pivot becomes obvious. You were blind to it before. Maybe your investor knew it all along and kept telling you you could never agree, never see it. For having that felt experience, a new perspective arises. And there comes the answer. It's the point when the nervous system adapts, you feel the emotion, and then the answer appears. You're no longer blind to it. Now, I think we're out of time. I don't tell a story about the fonts versus firing, but the short version is that my experience working with companies, in particular one that comes to mind, instead of firing the fundamentally misplaced team member, they focused on what they thought they could control in sort of a small fixation way, fonts on the website homepage. You may have your own version of this. So the risk of not dealing with this, not feeling it, are the things you see listed here. Pivots are deferred. Time goes by. The team departs. But the neurological response to feelings of futility is adaptation and emergence. And from that still point, we can have that new beginning. We can find a way to emerge with a new direction. So some of my ideas came from this fellow, thinking about how if we don't feel, we can't learn. That's something I picked up from Inc. magazine, although I wish I would have learned it 18 years ago. So we've talked about resilience and springing back in recovery. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about this, it's a topic I'm exploring. I'm just curious myself. I'll have a page up here eventually with the links to this slide deck and more information than I've referenced. You're welcome to follow with me there. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.